Okay,
Listen,
no problem.
I'm so interested. I was looking through the book. What prompted you to write and to be the publisher? Excuse me, not write, to publish the book Trans New York?
Um, well, I don't come from this community. In fact, I don't really come from, I've been kind of in outer space. I've been working in international development in developing countries for the last 20 years and doing stories on um, uh, various groups specializing in, refugees and marginalized, oppressed people all over the world. I worked in Afghanistan for many years, all over Africa and the Middle East. And I came back to New York. The reason, there are a couple of reasons. One is practicality. I mean, I was here, I wasn't traveling a lot. I have these little kids now, so I wasn't traveling. And I sort of was looking for something that interested me, a story that interested me. And I find the trans situation, you know, fascinating and very difficult because here you have. I think trans people are more persecuted than any group in our country, actually, and so I was wondering why these stories are not getting out there. Why am I not hearing the stories of these, individuals who all have these incredible stories to tell? I mean, there's some of the best stories anywhere on earth are told by trans people because these stories start very early and they start in families and overcoming oftentimes um, uh, issues within families, even just to be who they are, right? So
Yeah.
that really interested me, um, and very li- very little else did, actually. I couldn't find too many stories that were that compelling, and so I just started. Uh, Actually, I just went down and took some pictures at the Pride Parade a year ago, and I got mostly very terrible pictures because you always do at parades because there's people in front, and you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I got one really stunning picture of a couple who were gender. I don't even know if they were trans, but they were gender non-binary, and they were very interesting and dramatic and in black and white. And I sent it to Julia Abramoff, the publisher at Apollo Publishers, who was the editor of a previous book I did called Passage to Afghanistan, which was based on my years of working there. So I sent it to her and she liked it, and we said, let's do a book.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. How did you begin working with Abby Stein?
Excuse me. So I was wondering who to get to write the foreword to this book, and actually there's a trans woman in the book, Grace Detravara, who I interviewed, and she is the first person who mentioned Abby to me. And then at the same time, um, I got to know the people who run the Trans Beauty Clinic, and was put in touch with Susan Sarandon, actually, who's a big trans advocate and funds the Trans Beauty Clinic, and Brigitte, who also runs it. I can't pronounce her last name, so I won't try, but um, uh, and originally I thought maybe we would even get Susan Sarandon to write the foreword because, she's not trans, but she's a trans advocate, and that would be a good thing for the book and give us legitimacy and help us sell it, blah, blah, blah. But then I contacted her and she said, she declined. And she said, I really think a trans person should write the foreword. And I agreed with her. I think that, that was a good idea. But what we wanted to avoid was getting a celebrity trans person. I mean, we didn't want to get just somebody who, because they had a name and they were a celebrity, whatever, an actor or whatever, but because it's very important that this had the legitimacy of the New York City trans community. And so Abby happens to be, a celebrity, but also is very, very connected to New York, and that's the other part of this book. It's also about New York City and this being a very unique place in the world for the trans experience and the history of transgender rights, and trans people being able to actualize their reality. So I got put in touch with Abby, and I contacted her, and she agreed to do it, and that's how we did that.
That's wonderful. How did you have all these different people that you've done like little profiles on, and you've talked to all these different trans people. How did you find them all in New York?
That's a good question. I found a few through people I know. A lot of them, there are a lot of trans people working in the entertainment and media field. So I got a few contacts that way. Puya Husseini, who is a Iranian actress and activist, and a few others. And then also I just went on Instagram, just like any other person, and
Yeah.
I just started reaching out to people out of the blue. And some of the people, were suspicious at first because the trans community has obviously been taken advantage of a lot, and people wanted to make sure that, if I was going to do this project, it was not just to, tell their stories and run off and, make millions of dollars, which hasn't happened. and they'll never see me again. And there have been several films that they gave me examples of that have been done, and that was the case. So I've been very, very fortunate, but I also very carefully made sure that look, we've been very lucky with this book. The timing has been good. We've gotten amazing reviews in mainstream media, got a great review in Publishers Weekly, and another one in a UK outlet called The Article, and lots of others in both the mainstream and the LGBT media. But it was very important to me to have the legitimacy and the buy-in of the trans community. That, because if I hadn't done that, then I would have felt like the book failed. So that was extremely important to me, and I have really gotten that and maintained that. So even though I really seek out a broad audience, it's also really important that this book is for and by the New York City trans community.
That's wonderful. Did
Yeah.
you face any challenges while you were creating this book?
Well, one challenge was that, as I mentioned, people were a little, some people were suspicious of why was I doing this? So, and some people, didn't want to let me interview them. And I told everybody from the beginning, I totally get that, because if I was a trans person, I would be very suspicious of people trying to, take advantage of my story as well. So I that was a challenge. But once I got to a few influencers and people saw what I was doing, and I got the buy-in of the community moving ahead, then it was much easier. Other challenges, I mean, there were some physical challenges with, I basically, it was a combination of, the locations were a combination of uh, places I wanted to shoot, but it's New York City, so reality always infringes on your ideals. So, weather, how, who's coming from where could we meet, that kind of thing. Because I definitely wanted New York City also to be the other character in the book. And it is, we have, iconic locations, Grand Central, places like that, but also just kind of random locations. But I wanted you to feel the city through the portraits as well. I didn't want to just, shoot these in a studio or something where you have the individuals, because the city is the other part of it. So I wanted that there. And so there were challenges of, I had to meet with more than 50 people, and getting there when the light is good, and
Yeah.
they can get there and I can get there, and there's not a snowstorm that stops us meeting, and that kind of thing. So there were those kind of physical challenges like that. There was a little in terms of doing the interviews. I sent them to them because I had to do those too. So I sent them to them online, and then they did them, and then I got them back, and ideally I was going to read them all and meet them, but half the time at least they didn't get them to me. So I had to go there, and then sometimes they didn't even have them, and then they would get them to me weeks later or whatever, but we got them all in the end. But rounding that stuff up was a little. I'm not particularly great with that, that kind of stuff. I'm very spontaneous. I'm very seat of the pants. That part of the shoot went well for me. The some of the logistics were a little bit of a challenge, but that's more a challenge to me than to them.
Yeah, but I had to ask because this book is just like such a huge, just a monumentous thing, like all these different interviews and the photos everywhere. And I remember you were talking earlier, you said that you don't normally you don't normally shoot like trans people. This was new for you, and you have a different style. How would you describe your style of photography for people that haven't seen your work?
Yeah, well, it's not necessarily a different style. It's a different subject, though. So, I've been doing, pictures in refugee camps, and, definitely my style is street photography. Uh, so these are really portraits, but they're really environmental portraits.
Mhm.
So style-wise, that was not a challenge because I know very well really what I want
Yeah,
visually. So that part was not really any different. It was really just the, turning changing the getting a different subject.
yeah. Now, do you have any plans for any future books?
Um, I don't have any firm plans. I'm kind of open. I mean, I'm even open to some more trans books.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
I've had a couple of ideas, some domestic ideas. I thought maybe a trans California book might be cool. And also, I've been, I work abroad a lot. And in fact, the first place I exhibited these pictures was in Pakistan. Last summer, or last fall, I was invited to the Islamabad Arts Festival, and I did an exhibit of the trans pictures. And, you know, transgenders in South Asia, Pakistan and India and that region, they are very visible. I mean, it's not to say they're not persecuted, because they are, like they are in much of the world, but they're very visible, and they're very much a part of the culture. They, are very prominent in, entertainers at weddings and things like that. So it's not a thing that people avoid, but it is a thing that still needs a lot of work in terms of transgender rights. That being said, Pakistan has complete legal transgender people have complete legal rights in Pakistan to marry and to inherit and all of that, which is kind of surprising to some people. But
Yeah.
there's nothing innate in Islam, just like I don't think there's anything innate in Christianity that is against transgender people.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it's kind of interesting to see Pakistan having these rights when you just look at the news a few days ago and the Trump administration started to roll back Obama era protections for trans healthcare. How do you feel about that?
Well, there's no question the Trump administration has an agenda to try to erase transgender rights, and thank God we live in a country where we still have a Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And even though the Supreme Court was further to the right than we would have preferred, they still did the right thing,
Yeah.
And I should dedicate this to Neil Gorsuch, actually, who's from my hometown of Boulder, and
Oh.
voted the right way. And we could have known he's from Boulder, and he's not, crazy evangelical. So
Yes.
thankful for that. Look, but Trump. Look, Trump it doesn't have any viewpoint on anything. He's just says whatever that people want to hear that will support him. And the evangelicals have said they'll support him, and they want to erase transgender rights. Many of them, not all of them, but many of them do. And supposedly that's something in the Bible, but I don't think it is in the Bible. And by the way, half of them have been divorced, so they should also disenfranchise themselves.
Yeah.
And all the other things they do that are in the Bible that they do themselves. So that's one thing. But a bigger thing, I think, in this country is that people who are progressives. This has been a big surprise for me doing this book. People who are progressives, many of my friends, when it comes to the transgender issue, there is radio silence. And I don't think people who consider them progressives, and even they will mouth the fact that they support transgender rights, but I don't think many of them feel comfortable with it yet. And perhaps that's because it hasn't evolved far enough yet. I mean, look, when I was in college in the 80s, I think the gay movement was about where the trans movement is right now. It was really just getting onto the plate of the country. And, now, I mean, my generation, for most people, there's absolutely no issue with gay people.
Mm-hmm.
But with many people my age, they still are uncomfortable talking about transgender people. And that has been a really big surprise for me. So I think that, and this was the point of the book, that this issue needs to get out there, and people need to feel comfortable with transgender people, and they don't need to understand it. As many people in the book told me, they said, look, we don't need to be understood, we need to be accepted and respected, and that's where we need to get with that.
Yeah. Well, as a person, a part of the trans community, when I heard about this a few weeks ago and we were planning the interview, I was just so excited to obviously speak with you. So thank you. And it's definitely, there's not many books out there that you can say that, like, as trans people, that like support and lift them up. All I've really seen are just like books of like a celebrity's life story, but that's a very skewed perspective than the realities of most trans people across the United States. So where can people buy this book after they watch this video?
You can buy it all over the place. I mean, you can buy it on Amazon, but I'm not a huge fan of making Jeff Bezos even richer. So
Yeah.
I support going to, of course, leave a review on Amazon if you would, but buy a book somewhere else. Buy the book on, independent book. Just if you Google it, you'll see a whole bunch of places. Barnes and Noble. There's an independent bookstore website that the money goes more towards independent bookstores, and I don't know what it is, but if you just Google the book and like independent bookstores, that people would find it. Also, they can buy it on the website of Apollo Publishers.
Okay.
Or you can go even to my website, peterbussian.com, and there's a link to my publisher, and you can buy it there. So there are many places. And by the way, it's great to meet you, and I applaud your journey as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for talking with me. Everything you said was so interesting, and I'm happy we got the chance to talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Serena. Thank you very much.
You
Good
too.
luck.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.